The horizon burned red as Caleb Holt rode into Redstone, his spurs jingling faintly against the sides of his mare. Dusty. The town was a speck of life in the vast Wyoming territory, its wooden buildings weathered by wind and time. Caleb's face was lined with dust, his eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. He'd been riding for weeks, chasing whispers of a man who owed him blood, but tonight his body ached for rest and Dusty's uneven gait begged for a stable. He hadn't planned to stop, but the glow of the saloon's lanterns and the hum of voices pulled him in like a moth to flame. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the sharp tang of cheap whiskey. Men crowded around poker tables, their laughter jagged, their eyes glinting with greed. Caleb pushed through, his boots heavy on the creaking floorboards, aiming for the bar. But something stopped him cold. In the far corner, beneath a smoky lantern, stood a woman. She was tall, her black hair braided loosely, her skin kissed by the sun. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope, and her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the room with a defiance that didn't match her situation. Beside her, a wiry man in a patched coat shouted, "Step up, gents!" "She's a fine one, strong, quick, and worth her weight in gold." Caleb's stomach turned. He'd seen cattle auctions, horse trades, even land swaps, but this was a different kind of ugliness. The man, a trader with a snake's grin, kept barking. $200 and she's yours. Cook, clean, or whatever else you fancy. The crowd jeered, coins clinking as bets were made. Caleb's hand twitched toward his revolver, but he froze when the woman's gaze locked onto his. Her eyes weren't pleading. They were challenging, daring him to act or walk away. "You," she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "If you're just gonna stare, keep moving. But if you've got the spine, do something." The room hushed. The trader laughed, slapping his knee. "Hear that, boys? She's got fire. $250 and I'll throw in the rope." Caleb's jaw tightened. He didn't know why. Maybe it was her voice, maybe it was the way she stood tall despite the rope. But his hand moved to the leather pouch at his belt. Coins spilled onto the table, heavy and deliberate, each one ringing like a church bell. The crowd muttered, some angry, some amused. The trader's grin widened as he counted. 300, Caleb said flatly, tossing in the last of his silver. "Now cut her loose." The trader shrugged, slicing the rope with a knife. The woman stumbled forward, her balance thrown by the sudden freedom. Caleb caught her arm, steadying her. She was lighter than she looked, but her grip on his wrist was iron. "You paid," she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. "Don't make me regret it." He didn't answer. He let her out, ignoring the jeers and the trader's parting shout. "She's yours now, cowboy. No refunds." Outside the night was cold, the stars sharp as needles. The woman shivered, her thin dress no match for the Wyoming wind. Caleb untied his coat and draped it over her shoulders. She didn't thank him, just pulled it tight and followed him to Dusty. "What's your name?" he asked as he helped her onto the saddle. "Sarah," she said after a pause. "Sarah Blackthorne. At least that's what they call me now." Her voice was steady, but there was a crack in it like a riverbed gone dry. Caleb mounted behind her, his arms brushing her sides as he took the reins. She tensed but didn't pull away. "Where are we headed?" she asked. "My camp," he said. "Ain't much, but it's safe." She snorted softly. "Safe's a lie out here, but I'll take it for tonight." They rode in silence, the only sounds the creak of leather and the wind whistling through the sagebrush. Caleb's camp was a half-mile out, a small fire pit and a lean-to tucked against a rocky outcrop. He helped Sarah down, then set to building a fire. She watched him, her eyes catching the flame's reflection, wary but curious. "You live like this?" she asked, gesturing at the sparse setup. "Just you and the wind?" "Been that way a while," Caleb said, poking the fire. "Suits me." Sarah sat across from him, the firelight carving shadows into her face. "Why'd you pay for me?" she asked. "Don't tell me it was pity." Caleb met her gaze. "Didn't like the look of that trader, or the idea of you being sold like a horse." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. "You're a fool, then. Men don't spend silver on strangers unless they want something." "I don't want anything," he said, his voice low, "except maybe to sleep without hearing that trader's voice in my head." She studied him, then leaned back, wrapping his coat tighter. "You're not like them," she said softly, "but you'll have to act like it. They'll come looking. They always do." "Who's they?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared into the fire, her fingers tracing the frayed edge of the coat. "The men who took me," she said finally. "I was a scout for a wagon train out of Colorado. Knew the trails better than most. But we got ambushed. Comanche, they said. but it was white men dressed like them. Took me, sold me to that traitor. Said I was worth more alive than dead. Caleb's hand tightened on the stick he was using to stoke the fire. They still hunting you? Likely, she said. They don't let go of what they think is theirs. He nodded, the weight of her words settling into him. Then they'll have to come through me. Sarah's eyes softened just for a moment. You don't know what you're signing up for, Caleb Holt. He didn't argue. The fire crackled and the night stretched around them, vast and unforgiving. He didn't know her story, not really, but he felt the truth of it in her voice. She wasn't just a woman in trouble. She was a storm waiting to break. By dawn, they'd packed the camp. Caleb offered her a spare horse from a nearby trader he'd dealt with before, a sturdy bay mare named Clover. Sarah took to the saddle like she'd been born in it, her movements sure and practiced. You weren't lying about being a scout, Caleb said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Never lied about anything, she replied, her eyes scanning the horizon. Except maybe my name. He raised an eyebrow, but she didn't elaborate. They rode north, toward a valley Caleb knew where the creeks ran clear and the land was too rough for most to bother with. As the sun climbed, the air warmed and Sarah's silence grew heavier. Finally, she spoke. You ever lose someone, Caleb? He didn't look at her. My brother. 2 years back. Rustlers got him over a dozen cattle. She nodded like she'd expected it. That why you're out here alone? Chasing ghosts? Something like that, he said. You? My family, she said simply. All gone. The land took them one way or another. They didn't speak again for hours, but the silence wasn't empty. It was the kind that grows between two people who've seen too much to waste words. By midday, they reached the valley, a stretch of green hemmed by jagged cliffs. Caleb set up camp near a creek and Sarah helped without being asked, gathering wood, checking the horses. Her hands moved with a quiet efficiency, but her eyes kept darting to the horizon. You expecting someone? Caleb asked, following her gaze. Always, she said. You should be too. That night, as the stars burned cold above, Caleb sat by the fire, his rifle across his lap. Sarah slept under the lean-to, her breathing soft but uneven like she was dreaming of running. He watched her, wondering what kind of life had carved that strength into her, and what it would cost him to keep her free. When the first hoofbeats echoed in the distance, Caleb was already on his feet, rifle cocked. Sarah woke instantly, her hand reaching for a knife she didn't have. They're here, she whispered, her voice steady but laced with something like regret. Caleb nodded, his eyes fixed on the dark shapes moving across the valley. Stay low, he said. This ain't their land. The night was alive with the sound of hooves, sharp and relentless against the valley floor. Caleb crouched behind a boulder, his rifle steady, his breath slow despite the pounding in his chest. Sarah knelt beside him, her eyes glinting in the moonlight, her body coiled like a spring. 3 riders approached, their silhouettes jagged against the silvered cliffs. Caleb recognized the type. Bounty hunters, men who lived by the weight of their guns and the price on someone's head. Don't shoot unless I do, Caleb whispered. Sarah nodded, but her hand stayed near the knife Caleb had given her from his pack. The riders stopped at the edge of the creek, their horses snorting clouds of steam into the cold air. The leader, a broad man with a face scarred like old leather, called out, Holt, we know you're here. Hand over the woman and we'll leave you breathing. Caleb's grip tightened on the rifle. Ain't nobody here but me, he shouted back. You're on my land. Right on. The leader laughed, a sound like gravel under boots. Your land? This is open country, boy, and that woman's worth $100 dead, $200 alive. You pick. Sarah's breath hitched, but she didn't move. Caleb leaned closer, his voice low. You trust me? Her eyes met his, fierce and searching. Don't have much choice, she said softly. But yeah, I do. Caleb nodded, then stood, stepping into the open, rifle raised but not aimed. Last chance, he said. Right away or you'll be buried here. The leader's grin vanished. His hand twitched toward his revolver and the world exploded into chaos. Caleb fired first, the shot cracking through the night, dropping the leader from his saddle. The other 2 riders drew, but Sarah was already moving, darting low and fast toward the horses. She slashed the reins of one, sending it rearing, throwing its rider into the dirt. Caleb's second shot took him down before he could stand. The 3rd rider wheeled his horse, firing wildly. A bullet grazed Caleb's shoulder, hot and sharp, but he didn't flinch. He fired again and the man slumped, his horse bolting into the dark. Silence fell, heavy as the dust settling around them. Sarah ran to Caleb, her hands shaking as she checked his shoulder. "You're hit," she said, her voice tight. "Just a scratch," he said, wincing as he rolled his arm. "You hurt?" She shook her head, but her eyes were wide, her breath fast. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "You could have let them take me." Caleb looked at her, his face hard but his eyes soft. "Not a chance, Sarah. Not now, not ever." She stared at him, something breaking in her expression. Fear, gratitude, something deeper. She reached out, her fingers brushing his bloodied sleeve. "You're a damn fool," she whispered, but her voice cracked with something like awe. They buried the bodies at dawn, the ground hard and unyielding under the shovel. Sarah worked beside him, silent but steady, her braids swinging as she dug. When it was done, they stood over the unmarked graves, the wind carrying the faint scent of sage and blood. "They'll send more," Sarah said, her voice flat. "They always do." "Then we'll be ready," Caleb said. "This land's mine. You're mine. Not as property, as family." Her head snapped up, her eyes searching his. "Family?" she said, the word foreign, fragile. He nodded. "You're not running anymore, Sarah, not alone." For the first time she smiled, a real smile, small but bright, like the first star in a night sky. "You're stubborn as hell," she said. "But I'm starting to like it." The days that followed were quiet, the valley wrapping them in a fragile peace. Caleb taught Sarah how to mend traps, how to read the tracks of deer and wolves. She taught him the old trails, the ones her people had walked before the wagon trains came, paths hidden by time and sagebrush. They moved together, their silence comfortable, their trust growing like roots in the earth. But the shadow of the bounty hung over them. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the cliffs gold, a new rider appeared. Not a bounty hunter this time. A woman, older, her face lined with years and loss. She rode straight to the camp, her eyes fixed on Sarah. "Sarah Blackthorne," the woman said, her voice rough but kind. "I've been looking for you." Sarah froze, her hand tightening on the knife at her belt. "Who are you?" "Name's Eliza," the woman said. "I rode with your father's people before the ambush. They thought you were dead." "I didn't," Sarah's breath caught. "My father's people? They're gone." "Not all," Eliza said. "Some of us scattered, survived. We've been tracking you since Colorado. You're one of us, Sarah. You don't belong here hiding." Caleb stepped forward, his hand resting on his revolver. "She's not hiding," he said. "She's home." Eliza's eyes flicked to him, measuring. "You the one who bought her?" "I'm the one who freed her," Caleb said, his voice steady. "And I'll kill anyone who tries to take her." Eliza studied him, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But Sarah, your people need you. The trails aren't safe anymore. We need scouts, fighters. You know the land better than anyone." Sarah looked between Eliza and Caleb, her face torn. "I thought I had no one left," she said softly. "But now, I've got him." Caleb's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her to stay, to build a life here, but he saw the pull in her eyes, the call of a past she thought she'd lost. "Sarah," he said quietly, "whatever you choose, I'm with you. But you don't owe anyone anything." "Not me, not them." She turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You gave me a choice, Caleb. That's more than anyone's ever done." Eliza waited, patient but expectant. Sarah took a deep breath, then stepped closer to Caleb, her hand finding his. "I'm staying," she said, her voice firm. "This is my home now. But I'll help you, Eliza. I'll teach your people the trails, show them how to survive. But I'm not leaving him." Eliza nodded, a faint smile breaking through her weathered face. "You've got your father's heart," she said. "I'll send word. We'll come to you." As Eliza rode away, Sarah turned to Caleb, her hand still in his. "You didn't have to fight for me," she said. "But you did." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his calloused fingers gentle. "I didn't fight for you, Sarah. I fought for us." Winter came, blanketing the valley in snow. The bounty hunters didn't return, and word of Sarah's people began to spread, scouts and survivors finding their way to the valley, bringing stories, skills, and hope. Caleb and Sarah built a life, not just for themselves but for those who came seeking refuge. The camp grew into a small settlement, a place where the land remembered life, not just blood. One night, as the fire burned low and the stars glittered above, Sarah leaned against Caleb, her head on his shoulder. "You paid for me once," she said softly. "But what we've got now, it's worth more than silver." He smiled, his arm tightening around her. "Worth everything I've got," he said. "And then some." Outside, the wind sang through the valley, carrying the promise of spring. The land had seen blood, but it had also seen love. A love forged not in a deal, but in the choice to stand together, to fight, to build something new in a world that tried to break them. And as the seasons turned, the story of Caleb and Sarah spread, not as a tale of purchase, but as a legend of two souls who found each other in the wild and made a home where none should have been.